Hello and welcome. It's 6 p.m. and you're watching the Daily News Simplified. Now, today being 13th of March, we have picked up these 8 articles from 3 newspapers that we cover, that is the Hindu, Indian Express, and the Business Line. So, we'll start off with the first article right away. But before that, let me again highlight that Raus IAS, it has started its prelims revision classes from 9th of March, that was Monday. Now, the first classes for polity and economy, they went live on YouTube, but you have to register for the rest of the classes. So please do not forget to register for Raus IAS prelims revision classes. Now, let us first start off with the first article, which, as you can see, appeared on the Hindu newspaper. Now, this news article, it highlights the new sense of urbanization. Now, as you understand, urbanization is a core part of GS Paper 1 syllabus, thus making it important from main-centric discussion. Also, you can see that questions on urbanizations have been appearing in the mains quite frequently. Case in point, this question this year, that was mains 2023, where question was related to urbanization and social transformation. Also, a similar question appeared 10 years before, that was in 2013. So you can understand that this topic is very much important from mains point of view. So we'll discuss this topic in great detail. Now, first of all, what is an urban area? Now, in this regard, census, which is once in a decade exercise by Government of India, it describes or it defines towns of urban areas based on two types. Correct. The first are statutory towns. Now, these towns, they are governed by urban local bodies, especially municipal corporations, municipalities, or municipal communities. Now, this is second type of urban area, which are classified as census towns. Now, for any town to be categorized as a census town, it has to satisfy three conditions. The first is that the population of that area has to be more than 5,000 people. Whereas on the other hand, in terms of density, that particular area, its population density should be greater than 400 persons per square kilometer area. Whereas on the other hand, in terms of economic activities, the male workforce of that particular town, they should be, or more than 75% of male workforce of that area should be involved in a non-agricultural activity. Hence, when a town satisfies these three conditions, it is denominated as a census town by Census of India. So now you understand what is an urban area. So there are few characteristics which you usually find in an urban area. First of all, as I've already highlighted, the population density has to be quite high for an urban area. Whereas in terms of economic activities, these urban areas, they witnessed diversified economic activities, because naturally in rural area, you will find people are engaged predominantly in agricultural activity. Whereas on the other hand, in urban areas, people are involved in manufacturing, services, or other kinds of self-employment activities. Hence, the nature of economic activities, they are diversified in urban areas. Now, in terms of social composition, we find that the population in urban areas, they are heterogeneous in nature, which means people belonging to different castes, different religion, different languages, they live simultaneously in an urban area, thereby lending it a multicultural character of urban area. Now, in terms of governance, the governance in urban area is quite different from that of rural area, because primarily these, as I've already highlighted, these areas, they are governed by urban local bodies, thereby making planning an integral part. Now, naturally, as far as planning is concerned, you understand that every economic activity, it is given a designated spot in an urban area. Hence, these are characteristics that you'll usually find in an urban area. Now, as I've already highlighted, the process of urbanization, it is quite more than that, not just people moving from rural to urban areas, but it is much more than that. For example, the primary case that you see for a growth in urban areas is that people they move or they migrate from rural to urban areas, thereby leading to growth both in terms of geography and economy in of urban areas. Now, naturally, to supplement this geographical and economic growth, we need to witness or we need to have a higher level of infrastructure development. For example, we witness roads, bridges, public transport, other kinds of sanitation, housing projects. These are just highlights of how much infrastructure development you have to undertake in case of urban areas. Now, because of these increased population growth and infrastructure development, these urban areas they are centers of economic growth. Hence, they create a sense of economic transformation in the country. Because naturally, when people are moving from rural to urban areas, their economic productivity grows, and hence it lends economic transformation to any urban region. Now, also in terms of society, people belonging from different diverse cultures, languages, regions, they move to an urban agglomeration, thereby lending it a multicultural or social perspective. Hence, this has also resulted into great exchange of social and cultural values in urban areas. Hence, it is not just geographical growth but also social, cultural, and economic growth that signifies or that defines an urban area in any country. Now that we have discussed what are urban areas, let us understand how urbanization impacts Indian society in particular. Because as I've already highlighted, questions have been asked on this topic, but they're linked to other issues such as social growth and transformations also. So, first of all, let us understand how urbanization impacts a family. Now, naturally, you must be knowing that people in rural areas they naturally live in a joint family system. But when you move from rural to urban areas, we have witnessed this change that people from joint families they start to live as nuclear families in rural or urban areas. Hence, this change from joint family setup to nuclear family setup, it has transformed the nature of Indian families in urban areas. Because naturally, in any joint family system, childcare activities, care of senior citizens, they are undertaken by young family members themselves. But on the other hand, as far as nuclear families are concerned, activities such as child or elder care, they are not taken by the family members but rather by professionals. Hence, this has changed the system of Indian family. Now, let us discuss how urbanization impacts the hierarchy or the notion of caste. Now, in rural areas, you have witnessed that the nature of caste system is quite rigid because people they interact or they live together based on their caste based affiliations. But this is quite different in urban areas because when people move to urban areas, they usually hang out with people belonging to their workplace or from their educational institutions, thereby dilutes the strict hierarchies based on caste. So you can say in a way that this urbanization it dilutes the rigidity that is defined by Indian caste system in particular. So you can understand that this has in a way has had a positive effect on Indian society because in rural areas people are discriminated against based on caste, but this kind of discrimination it is not very much prevalent in urban areas because people they sit together in public transport, they interact in close confinements, they live together, so this dilutes the notion of caste. Now let us understand how urbanization affects women of India. Now, naturally, as I've already highlighted, women, especially in rural areas, they are engaged in mostly household activities. Thereby, the educational levels that they attain is generally low in urban areas or rural areas. But when it comes to women, especially in urban areas, they are higher, or they are being increasingly educated in much more greater numbers. So this has created, or this has empowered women in a way. So naturally, women in urban areas, they are more educationally qualified. They have higher health standards, thereby making them more economically productive in nature. So this increased autonomy as well as incomes of women, it has lent, or it has empowered them in a quite a positive way. But this is not just the case as far as women are concerned. In another way, women are also being subjected to increased discrimination in urban areas, especially at their workplaces. And there are also issues related to their safety and well being. Because, as you know, the crime rates in urban areas are quite more. And it, in a way, negatively affects Indian women. So, you understand that on one hand, urbanization gives women more opportunities for personal growth, thereby empowering them, but it also negatively affects women because women are subjected to harassment and exploitation in urban areas. So this is not just one sided impact, it has both positive and negative impact on family, caste and women. So let us understand how urbanization impacts village life. Now you may have heard, especially in your paternal houses, that people, especially who live in rural areas, they are not unable to find adequate labor, because naturally when population they start migrating from rural to urban areas, the workforce, especially the ones who are economically productive, they do not live in villages. Hence the amount of workforce or labor, it has reduced in rural areas. However, on the other hand, rural areas, they have also witnessed influx of remittances and knowledge from urban areas, because people who have moved away from rural areas, they are sending money, thereby leading to development in village life. Also, people who move to urban areas, they increasingly share their experiences, thereby increasing the technology level and awareness in village levels. Hence, urbanization, it also has a both positive and negative effect on Indian villages in particular. Now let us understand how are Indian social institutions transforming because of urbanization. Now, as I've already highlighted, levels of education as well as healthcare have witnessed enormous development with process of urbanizations, because in urban areas you witness development of educational institutions, healthcare facilities, thereby strengthening people's educational and healthcare levels. However, it is also important to note that these services, they come at a price. Hence people who are economically well off, they are able to access these services at their own ease. However, on the other hand, people belonging to somewhat lesser economic or somewhat inferior economic backgrounds, they are also facing difficulties in accessing these healthcare and educational services. Hence, urbanization, it has increased opportunities or avenues for seeking education and healthcare. But these avenues, they are primarily catered to economically well-off population. Whereas on the other hand, economically weaker section of population, they are not able to access these services in a more opportune manner. Understood? So these were the impacts of urbanization in India. Now with this, let us understand what are the positives of urbanization. First of all, in terms of opportunities, as you understand, economic opportunities in terms of jobs, they are quite high in urban areas. Hence, this has acted as a source of pull factor which pulls the people away from rural areas and into urban areas. Hence, people who are looking for increased job opportunities, they migrate from rural to urban areas. Further, in terms of infrastructure development, especially that of public transport, sanitation and other household facilities, the level of development in urban areas is quite high when you compare it with urban area or rural areas. So also in terms of increased infrastructure development of the country, you can witness this in terms of increased urbanization. as more and more people are looking to move to urban areas. So this requires an increased level of infrastructure, which is already being done by both government and the private sector. Now, in terms of society and culture, we witness Indian urban areas, they act as a melting pot for various cultures and backgrounds. Hence, people belonging to diverse cultures, languages, and regions, they get together in urban areas, and it witnesses or it leads to increased awareness and knowledge of people belonging to every section of the society. So, in a way, it has a positive impact on society and culture, thereby making people of India more tolerant, more aware, as well as more socially acceptable. Now, let us understand what are the positives with respect to education opportunities. Now, naturally, in urban areas, you can witness higher levels of educational in primary, secondary, as well as in higher educational opportunities. With in urban areas, people have opportunities not just to get technically educated, but also pursue their educational based on liberal arts and other subjects. So, in terms of educational opportunities, it is quite significantly high in urban areas. So, naturally, when people are educated in urban areas, it also means that the technological penetration levels of people in urban areas, it is also high. Hence, you can see in urban areas, so companies such as software development, digital public infrastructure, they set up their units in urban areas because people not just are highly educated, but they are also self-aware in terms of technology access is concerned. Hence, this creates a potent workforce. And by setting up of shops, especially in technology sector, the companies they are looking to harness these opportunities and increase workforce. So naturally, because of all these five factors combined, what we witness is not just economic empowerment, but also social and political empowerment in urban areas. Because, first of all, people get jobs, thereby making them economically empowered. And also, the rigid caste structure that we see in rural areas, it is not prevalent or it is not that much present in urban areas. Thereby, especially that of marginalized section of society, they witness social transformation in urban areas. And when you combine social and economic transformation, we also witness people are more politically aware in urban areas. Hence, urbanization, it makes people economically, social, and politically empowered. Correct. But naturally, there are two sides of same coin. First of all, we discussed what were the advantages of urbanization. Now, let us discuss what are the challenges associated with urbanization. And the first challenge right away is that we witnessed overcrowding in urban areas. Because India, which was primarily an agricultural based society. So when urban areas they started being developed in India, many people belonging to rural areas and agricultural background, they started to look forward to many increased opportunity in urban areas. Hence, the scale of rural to urban migration in the country it is quite high. Hence, what we witness is that the population, especially that of urban agglomeration, they are overcrowded in nature. And when this overcrowding is combined with ineffective governance, especially by urban local bodies in the country, it leads to strain on Indian infrastructure. Because most of urban areas, especially Delhi and other metro cities, you witnessed traffic jams, stuffed public transport, and these phenomena they signify that the infrastructure levels of urban areas it is not sufficient to cater to increased population. Hence, in terms of service provision, especially that of sanitation or waste management, Indian cities have proven to be inadequate. Hence, when overcrowding is coupled with ineffective governance, it leads to strain on infrastructure. And this strain of infrastructure, it trickles down into inadequate levels of service provision, especially with levels to access to healthcare, education, sanitation, and waste management services. Correct? So, this manifests into increased population and degradation of urban areas. Particularly, with example of Delhi, you witnessed increased level of pollution. Why? Because increased economic activities such as industrializations, construction activities, it leads to increased air pollution in Delhi. Further, as we have already witnessed, the levels of vehicular population or pollution is also quite high in Delhi because more and more people they are using their own means of transport. And why are they using own means of transport? Because the levels of public transportation are not quite high. So this economic activities and vehicular pollution, they increase the levels of pollution levels in any urban agglomeration. Further, the natural resources of any urban area, for example in Bengaluru, earlier there were many water bodies and lakes, but with increased population, what we have witnessed that these urban water bodies they were encroached upon. Hence, you can say that increased pollution leads to degradation of natural resources, thereby straining the already stressed urban areas. Hence, you can understand because of overcrowding, ineffective governance, inadequate levels of service provision, we witness increased social exclusion, especially that of vulnerable section. And what are vulnerable section in urban areas? They are people who are poor and marginalized. So when people belonging to relatively well-off economic status, they are able to access many opportunities that are there in urban areas. But when it comes to people who belong to poor and marginalized section, they primarily live in slums, thereby the levels of healthcare and educational services they are inadequate. Also, they live in close confinements to waste generated areas. Hence, this leads to a kind of social exclusion for poor and marginalized people who live in urban areas. And also, when levels of infrastructure, especially that of housing infrastructure, it is not high in urban areas, it leads to a phenomena which is known as people they start living in slums. Hence, this highlights the overall degradation of urbanization that has taken place in Indian society. Understood. So let us now move forward with what should be the suggestions that Indian policymakers should inculcate in order to make Indian urbanization a more sustainable and more bearable process. Correct. Now, the first suggestion in this regard right away is that the policymaker should focus on the effective urban governance in the country. And how can they provide effective urban governance? They can do so by ensuring integrated urban planning, increasing citizens' participation in the governance process, or ensuring collaborative governance where not just government but also civil society organizations such as NGOs as well as private sector they take development of urban areas in togetherness. Hence, when the levels of governance, especially in urban areas, are effective, and especially when the workforce is have or has had capacity building and knowledge exchange exercises, we can witness in high levels of infrastructure development in any urban area. For example, there's a city in Madhya Pradesh called Indore, which has made significant improvement as far as waste management is concerned. So naturally, waste management practices of Indore city should be shared with other cities and likewise in order to enable exchange of best practices in the country. Hence, also we need to undertake high levels of infrastructure development. For example, we should provide high levels of public transport to people as it will not just help reduce congestion on roads but will also reduce the emissions that are made by transportation sector. Again, in terms of housing, any urban areas should provide for affordable housing in particular. And this suggestion is very much important in order to reduce the amount of slums in any urban areas. And this also highlights the needs for sustainable urban planning, because these urban areas, because of their high population density and encroachment on natural resources, they are very much prone to disasters. Hence, any urban planning, it should inculcate provisions for disaster management in particular. Also, these urban areas, they should look forward to provide high levels of waste management in any urban areas, because by reducing the waste in any urban areas, we will reduce the pollution levels in any urban area, thereby increasing the quality of life in these urban areas. And also, the government should ensure social upliftment and inclusion of the most vulnerable sections in urban areas. Hence, basic levels of educational as well as healthcare services, they should be offered to entire population in urban areas, thereby giving them the opportunity to utilize the economic opportunities given by these urban areas. And also, we need to reduce the pollution outload in these urban areas. And for that, we need to promote sustainable lifestyles. First of all, people should consume less and also should use public transport in more and more increased manner. Hence, by promoting public transport and reducing consumption, we can ensure sustainable lifestyles in urban areas, thereby reducing the overall use of resources. Hence, this was an elaborate discussion or urbanization, and with this, we move to second article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Indian Express op-ed section. Now, today's author, that is Mr. C. Raja Mohan, he has highlighted that there is a possibility of second presidency of President Trump. Now, this leads to significant challenges all over the world. But now you'll ask a question, how does a domestic politics, especially that of United States, affect India in general? So for that, it is important to know that India is an important economic and strategic partner of United States. So any changes in policies of developed countries and developing countries, it has a significant bearing on India's interest. Thereby, this is important from GS paper 2 perspective. Correct? So in this regard, let us discuss what were the major decisions made by President Trump during his first tenure. Now in this regard, President Trump made major decisions which can be categorized into two categories. First of all, in terms of strategic decisions, President Trump, he wanted to check the rise of China. And how? He created for that the notion of Indo-Pacific. So based on notions of Indo-Pacific, US, it promoted the quadrilateral grouping of four members. That is Australia, India, United States as well as Japan. So these groupings, especially that of Quad, it was primarily made to check the rise of China. And in terms of economic decisions, Trump imposed significant tariff, especially on that of China, to reduce US's dependence on China as far as economic purposes were concerned. So these two were the major steps that were taken by President Trump during his first tenure. But also these steps also brought forward many other policies by President Trump. First of all, after World War II, what we witnessed that US, it increased its encroachment, or it wanted to increase its influence on many allies. Hence, in this regard, US, it created a network of social, military as well as cultural institutions all over the world, which in a way forwarded its ideology. So this was categorized as entrenched globalism. And in this matter, United provided for security architecture for protection of Europe through North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And also US, it guaranteed the safety of South Korea and Japan from that of Soviet Russia through an elaborate mechanism of security decisions such as placing military in Japan, etc. So this was what called an entrenched form of globalism. But as President Trump, he highlighted that this entrenched globalism, it imposed a significant cost on US citizens in terms of tax outgo, as well as death of US citizens in many other global wars. So President Trump, he tried US to move away from this sense of entrenched globalism. So this meant that US attitude towards its allies, especially that of European allies as well as Japan, it became increasingly hostile. So this created a sense of insecurity with US allies, especially Europe and Japan. And this becomes crucial, especially when Europe is engaged in a war with Russia on Ukraine and Russian front. So in a way, Europe needs US security, not in terms of just military, but also economic security. So when Trump is expected to come, this increases the insecurity in terms of European Union. Correct. And also, before President Trump, United States, it provided its allies an access to markets of United States. And how was this access provided? It was provided in a non-reciprocal manner, which means that developing countries such as India and Bangladesh, they can export goods to US markets at a significantly lower tariffs, whereas same advantage was not applicable for goods that were coming from US. So this was non-reciprocal benefits which were extended to many countries. But again, President Trump highlighted that extension of these non-reciprocal benefit, it reduced the economic heft of US in general, because it led to moving away of industries from US to other countries, thereby reducing the amount of jobs that are available in US. Hence, these were the major policy decisions that were taken by President Trump during his first tenure. And let us understand how these set of policy decisions impact India. Now, in terms of strategic decisions are concerned, as you see that the primary motive of any United States government is to ensure the check of Chinese rise. So in a way, US has created a set of institutions such as Indo-Pacific architecture as well as quadrilateral grouping. Thereby, it brings India a positive impact on India's strategic dimensions as far as concerned. Now, this positive development in strategic dimension is not the same with that of developments in economic front, because as you understand, US it imposed tariffs on goods not just from China but also from US allies like India. And in this way, President Trump he labeled India as a tariff king. And in a way, President Trump he highlighted that India does not provide easy access to goods which are made in US. So he threatened that he will impose tariffs on Indian goods. Thereby, it is a negative development on India's economic front. So you can witness, as far as strategic dimension is concerned, India is quite dependent on US, and hence any development which is made to check the rise of China, it is a positive development as far as India is concerned. Whereas on the other hand, any measure to impose tariffs on goods that are coming to US, it brings a negative development or negative effect on Indian trade with US is concerned. So this was the gist of today's op-ed, which was written by C. Raja Mohan. And with this, let us move to the third article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now, this news article, it highlights that last week, India was able to make a significant development as far as its three-stage nuclear program is concerned. Hence, I covered in great detail in 4th of March about what is India's three-stage nuclear program. So after this session ends, please go to DNS of 4th of March to take a deep overview of what is India's three-stage nuclear development is concerned. Now, naturally, any dependence on nuclear for power generation will lead to pollution in form of nuclear waste. So you can understand that this topic is pertinent from GS paper 3 syllabus, which highlights environmental pollution and degradation. Now you'll ask, how is this nuclear waste generated? Correct. So let us understand what is this nuclear fission process is all about. Now, as I've already highlighted last week, on 4th of March, that this nuclear energy is generated by bombarding a slow moving neutron on a fissile material, for example, this uranium 235. So when this fissile material, it is bombarded with a slow moving neutron, this radioactive material, it disintegrates into many components. So this leads to creation of barium as well as krypton. So, and also this process, it emits a large amount of energy which can be generated in a form of heat. So this is what leads to development of nuclear energy. But on a side note, what we are left with is these non-fissile materials, especially that of barium and krypton. So these barium and krypton, they constitute what is called a nuclear waste. And naturally, these nuclear waste, they are radioactive in nature. So in order to segregate this nuclear waste, we have to ensure that this waste does not leak as well as does not contaminate the natural resources in the close vicinity. And hence, in this regard, there are particularly 3 methods which are required to handle any nuclear waste. First of all, let us deal with the solid waste, which you can understand is primarily generated in form of spent nuclear rods, which constitute barium and krypton. So these solid nuclear waste, they are inserted in a water body for a large amount of time, and this is done in order to reduce the temperatures which are quite high after the nuclear reaction has taken place. So naturally, when the solid waste, it cools down, they are taken out of a water body and hence they are stored in steel or metal containers, which are then kept separately in a concrete chamber. And these solid waste, they are kept in situ, that is in and around the nuclear power generation sites. Now also, the nuclear energy process, it also generates some amount of liquid waste. Now this liquid waste, they are primarily disposed of in water bodies, and also these liquid waste, they are treated with use of chemicals, or they are evaporated in nature. So this liquid waste, they are disposed of in water bodies such as near seas or rivers, and also they are treated with chemicals, or they are subjected to evaporation in order to remove them from close atmosphere. Now also there's this third type, which are called reprocessing of nuclear waste, which means segregating fissile material from non-fissile material. And these fissile material, they are then used for other nuclear purposes. Hence in this regard, India has a nuclear processing technology or fuel processing technology, especially in Trombay, Tarapur, as well as Kalpakkam in Tamil Nadu. Whereas in terms of management of solid and liquid waste are concerned, they are primarily done in situ, which I by mean that they are managed in and near the nuclear power generation sites. So this was the methods that are employed to handle nuclear waste. And with this, let us move to next article of the day, which you can see also appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now this article in particular, it deals with affirmative action policies that are reservation policies. And these reservation policies, they are found in Indian Constitution, And as they are significant provisions of the Indian Constitution, thereby they are important from GS paper 2 perspective. Correct? Now, this news article, it highlights that the subcategorization as far as scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are concerned, they cannot be done by state government themselves. And why? Because of the some judgments that were given by Supreme Court before. Now, to understand this topic, let us first understand what is right to equality and what are reservation policies. Now, as you know, Article 14, 15 as well as 16, they constitute what is called a code of equality. Now, this code of equality, especially that of Article 14, it highlights two notions of equality. First is equality before law, and the second provision is equal protection of law. Now, this idea, it highlights absolute equality, whereas this idea, it highlights substantive equality. Now, what is absolute and what are substantive equality? Let me understand you, or let me make you understand this distinction with the help of a simple example. For example, this picture that I've attached in this slide, this shows kids of three different heights. Now, these kids, they are of different heights. So, you can understand when they're made to stand on a simple pedestal, they cannot see the match which is ongoing in this arena. Because child who is that of the lowest height, he or she will not be able to see the match. So, in this regard, you can extrapolate this example not just with child but also with that of people belonging to different backgrounds. Understood? So, a person who belongs to a economically or socially well-off background and a similar person who belongs to a economically weaker background, he or she will not be able to have a single or a similar opportunity in terms of accessing to jobs, educational institutions. Thereby, in this regard, the Constitution of India, it also provides the provision for substantive equality, which means that a particular section of society, if they were backward by some measure, then the Constitution itself, it allows for a segregation of that section of population. For example, we understand that there are marginalized section or backward sections in Indian society. And how are these sections backward? By virtue of their social and educational backwardness. So, in order to protect the members of these backward sections who are categorized as scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and backward classes, the Constitution of India, especially under Article 15 and 16, it provides for reservation of seats in public employment as well as educational institutions. Hence, people who belong to these categories, they have reservation policies as far as accessing to public jobs and educational institutions are concerned. And this is the crux of reservation policies. Now, for reservations of backward classes of citizens, in this regard, the Supreme Court of India, in Indra case, it highlighted that the state can segregate between the members of these backward classes because these are homogeneous identities, but there are also subcategorizations or many castes who are included in these respective classifications. So, by virtue of Indra judgment, the Supreme Court, it highlighted that the state can differentiate between a creamy layer, that is an economically well-off section in this backward classes of citizen, from economically not well-off section in the backward classes. So, by virtue of Indra judgment, this state, it can subcategorize caste in this backward classes category. But in terms of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, these benefits of subcategorization, they are not applicable. So when a state, it brought policies to subcategorize or to differentially treat members of the scheduled caste or scheduled tribes, these were invalidated by the Supreme Courts and High Courts, because the Supreme Court, it highlighted that it went against the notion of Article 351. Because first of all, Article 351, it highlighted that the President of India can only highlight which of the caste belong to these scheduled caste categories. And he or she can do so only through passage of law, that means a law of parliament. So in a way, state legislature, they are not empowered to categorize or designate any caste as scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. Correct. So today's article, it highlights that the notion of equal protection of law, that is substantive equality, it is a dynamic process. Because when reservation policies, they are extended to a marginalized section, some caste in these marginalized section themselves, they have a better access to these reservation policies. So over a period of time, what we have witnessed, that some caste, they have a higher level of development with respect to other caste. So in a way, caste who have extended or who have gotten more benefits of these reservation policies, they should be moved out of these reservation policies, and these reservation benefits should be extended to people belong or caste belonging to lesser development. So any measure that are taken by state governments in order to subcategorize caste in these scheduled caste should be treated as a valid measure in order to forward this very idea of substantive equality. Correct. So this was the gist of today's op-ed of the Hindu newspaper. And with this, let us quickly move to the prelim section of the society, today's discussion. And the first article, which you can see, it appeared in the in the world section of the Indian Express. Now, this news article, it specially highlights that a documentary which was made on Mariupol, it was extended or it was provided an Oscar award. Now, naturally, most of the places that have been in news, especially with respect to Russia and Ukraine war, they are in news all throughout the year. And hence, this development makes it important from UPSC perspective. Because in 2015, a question appeared on countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea. So, you can expect a question based on locations with respect to either Russia or Ukraine. And in this regard, we have also curated a practice question based on 4 towns which are located in Ukraine. Now, as you can see from this map, cities like Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kherson, as well as Mariupol, they are port towns of Ukraine. Whereas on the other hand, Donetsk and Luhansk, they are landlocked cities, thereby they are not accessible to sea. Hence, the correct answer, which asks us to identify the port towns that are located in Ukraine, is option B, because Mariupol, Odessa, as well as Kherson are the correct option, whereas Donetsk and Luhansk are not. Correct. So let us move to the second prelims related article, which appeared in the explained section of the Indian Express. Now, this article is about a person in California, US, who have been charged for smuggling of banned refrigerants, which were banned by Montreal Protocol. Now, these refrigerants, especially hydrofluorocarbons, they are ozone depleting substance, which means when they reach stratosphere, they react with ozone layer, thereby depleting this ozone layer. Hence, Montreal Protocol, which was introduced in 1987, it banned the use of these refrigerants because of their ozone depleting nature. Correct. So, and this topic is important from GS paper 3 syllabus because this syllabus deals with environment and biodiversity conservation. Further, a question on Montreal Protocol, it appeared in prelims of the year 2015. Understood. So let us discuss what is this Montreal Protocol all about. Now, first of all, there was this Vienna Convention which was organized in the year 1985. Now, this Vienna Convention, it is historically most successful treaty of all time, because as much as 197 states it ratified this Vienna Convention, which was passed in order to protect the stratospheric ozone layer. Now, in this Vienna Convention, a Montreal Protocol was also signed, which is a legally binding document. Now, this Montreal Protocol, it was legally binding on all the signatory parties, and these parties, they've agreed to phase out chlorofluorocarbons and other ozone depleting substance. Now, as a replacement, the nations who were phasing out these ozone depleting substance, they were encouraged to increase the use of hydrofluorocarbons, which has a significantly lower ozone depleting potential. Now, as these hydrofluorocarbon, they have lower ozone depleting potential, so the use of HFCs, they were encouraged as against the use of these ozone depleting substances. But it was later found out that these HFCs, despite having somewhat lower ozone depleting potential, it has a higher potential to increase global warming. So, as a measure, decisions were taken in Kigali session, which is called a Kigali Amendment. Now, this was passed in 2016, where parties, they agreed to phase out the use even of these hydrofluorocarbons because of their increased global warming potential. Now, naturally, every signatory is not equally placed. So, this Kigali Amendment, it divided the signatories into three different groups. And these groups, they were divided based on the nature of climate that the countries have. And in this regard, India, along with other tropical countries, they were categorized into the third group, which was given the most liberal time frame to phase out the use of these hydrofluorocarbons. Understood? So this is the basic gist of Montreal Protocol, and the more details I have provided them in the notes below. So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Consider the following substances: chlorofluorocarbons, carbon tetrachloride, carbon dioxide, and hydrofluorocarbons. Now, how many of the above are included in the Montreal Protocol? Now, from the original text of Montreal Protocol, you can understand that these two options are correct. Whereas as far as Kigali Amendment are concerned, hydrofluorocarbons are also included in the Montreal Protocol. Whereas carbon dioxide is not, thereby option C is the correct answer, as third three options are correct. Correct. So let us move to the next article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Indian Express op-ed section. Now in this article, the author, she highlights that instead of signing or instead of bringing Citizenship Amendment Act, the Indian government should have ratified or should have signed the Geneva Convention on Refugees. Correct. Now, why are we taking up this particular article on Geneva Convention? And this is because UPSC from time to time asks questions on various different conventions and agreement. For example, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed in the year 1948. And this question appeared in the year 2020, which was quite recent. You can understand the topic, that is Geneva Convention on Refugees. It is important from prelims perspective. Now, this Geneva Convention, it was brought forward in the year 1951, and in 1967, a protocol was signed. Now, the original convention and its protocol, what it does is that it defines who are refugees and who are not refugees. And also this document, it provides right of individuals who have been granted asylum in any third country. Now the list of rights, which are quite expansive in nature, I've provided them in the notes, so you can refer to what kind of rights are available to Geneva Convention protectees in the notes after the session ends. Now, this convention, it also grants some responsibilities on the nations who have granted asylum to refugees. Now, you have to understand that the core principle of this Geneva Convention, it is non-refoulement. What is this non-refoulement? It is that any refugee who is seeking asylum in your country, and if he or she faces violence or threat to life in their original country, then that refugee should not be returned. So this is what principle on non-refoulement is all about. And this imposes a certain responsibility on the host country that they should not deny asylum to any person who is facing a threat to their life and freedom in their host original country. Correct? But also this Geneva Convention, it gives certain exemptions, such as countries that are not liable to extend refugee or asylums to people who have been involved in crimes against humanity, certain non-political crimes, as well as who have been guilty of acts which are contrary to the original philosophy of United Nations. So this is what Geneva Convention is all about. So let us solve the model question. Now, with reference to Geneva Convention of Refugees of 1951, consider the following statements. The first statement, it defines the refugee and sets out right of individuals who are granted asylum, which is a correct statement. The second statement, the core principle of 1951 convention is non-refoulement, which is again correct, because as I've already highlighted that any host country, they should not return an individual who is seeking asylum if that individual is facing threat to their life and threat to their freedom from their country of origin. Now, third statement, it extends protection to individuals who have committed crimes against peace or serious non-political crime outside the country of refuge. Now, this is an incorrect statement because these are certain exemptions that have been given by Geneva Protocol. So, the correct answer to this model question is option B. With this, let us move to the last article of the day, which appeared in the Business Line newspaper. Now, this article, it highlights that India has approved the OCI card request for people of origin or of Indian origin who are living in Mauritius and they belong to the 7th generation. Now, the provisions related to citizenship as well as benefits extended to other sections of the population, they are important from GS paper 2 perspective. Now also, prelims in the year 2021, it asked a question with relation to India and its citizenship conditions and various benefits. So this topic, that is overseas citizen of India and its related scheme, it is important from prelims perspective. Now let us quickly understand what is this overseas citizen of India scheme is all about. Now it is a form of a recognition that is given to people of Indian origin, and the qualification to get this OCI card, it is given in the notes which you can refer to on after the session ends. Now it is important to note that there are certain exemptions, especially that people who have been a citizen of Pakistan and Bangladesh or any other country which is notified by the central government, they are not extended the benefits of overseas citizen of India. Now, what are the benefits that are extended to people who have this OCI card? First of all, that they are given visa for multiple entry, multi-purpose visit, and also the visa are provided to them for a lifelong validity. Also, these people, they are exempted from registration of foreign regional registration officer, which has to be done by people holding Indian visas generally. Also, these people, they are given general parity with non-resident Indian in terms of economic, financial and educational activities. However, there's a certain exemption which means that people who have OCI card, they cannot buy properties related to agricultural and plantation. So this is an important exemption which you have to remember. The most important part of this OCI card that it does not give people the political rights, which means the people who have OCI card, they are not eligible to vote in Indian elections. They cannot hold public offices and they cannot have public employment in India. So these are the important exemptions and benefits that have been extended to members having OCI card of India. Now let us quickly solve the practice question. With reference to overseas citizen of India, consider the following statement. Statement 1. OCI card confers upon a holder the right to vote, which is an incorrect statement because I have already highlighted it does not confer any form of political rights to the beneficiaries. Now, second statement, it entitles the holder of right to contest elections for public offices in India, which again is an incorrect statement because again, members who have OCI card, they can neither vote nor can contest for public offices nor can get employed in public services. So the correct answer to this model question is option D, as both statement 1 and statement 2 are incorrect. So this was all for today's discussion in Daily News Simplified. And if you have liked this video, please do not forget to give us a thumbs up. So with this, I leave you for tonight. So let me wish you a very good night.